Welcome back to the 1189 Adventure, where we're reading the Bible cover to cover, 5 chapters a week for the next 5 years. If you've been with us so far, great. Thanks for joining us. If you haven't been joining us, you've got plenty of time to catch up, so please do so. I'm Sean. I'll be your host for this episode, and today we're going to be in chapter 39 of Genesis. We're going to get started here with a little background of what's happening. If you've been with us so far, then you understand where Joseph is currently at. Joseph got sold into slavery, by his brothers. So now we see Joseph. He's at Potiphar's house, and he is a slave to Potiphar's house. So understanding where Joseph's at and how he must be feeling, the Bible doesn't really tell us, but I know that from my point of view, if I put myself in Joseph's situation, I'd be feeling down. I'd be feeling lost. I'd be feeling discouraged. I'd be feeling rejected by my family because my own brothers sold me into slavery. But we don't see that attitude on Joseph. It seems like Joseph is just carrying on to carry on. It seems like he knows the Lord, and it seems like his relationship with God is in such a way that, he has faith in the Lord and knows that the Lord is going to be faithful to him. So we're going to pick that up right here in chapter 39. Like I said, Joseph was traded as a slave and is now in Potiphar's house. Now, Potiphar, he was a high-ranking Egyptian officer, and he was actually the captain of the guard to Pharaoh. So that's what the Bible tells us about Potiphar. So Potiphar's house was a very important house when it came to an Egyptian officer. But then in verse 2, it says that the Lord was with Joseph. And that is a key verse in this because that tells us that, the Lord was on Joseph's side. And it also says that he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Everything that he did, he was successful in. That's because God was with him. That's because the Lord was with him. And it didn't take long for Potiphar, as we see later on, Potiphar starts to realize that, hey, everything Joseph touches is great. Like he's successful. And he succeeds in everything that he does. And Potiphar realizes right here in verses, later on in verse 3, it says, Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. Potiphar is his master now, right? And we see that he was pleased, and we know that Joseph was successful. And Potiphar realizes that the Lord is with Joseph, so why not make him a more important member in your household? So that's what Potiphar does. So he makes him his own personal assistant and puts him in charge of the entire household and everything that he owns. Now, that's a whole lot of faith in a guy that we don't have the time frame of how long Joseph was there with Potiphar, but I imagine it was pretty quick when Potiphar realized that, hey, he's successful in everything he does. And then we go on, and from the moment that Joseph is put in charge of Potiphar's household, the Lord starts blessing Potiphar because of Joseph. Now, that's a very important thing because, Potiphar realized that the Lord was with Joseph, and then Potiphar gets blessed because of Joseph. A little further on, this is where the troubles start happening again for Joseph, because now Joseph has the most authority out of everyone in Potiphar's household, as far as a servant is concerned. But Joseph is a good-looking man. He is well built, and Potiphar's wife takes notice of him and tries to seduce him. And so, we see this right here in verse 7, where it says, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. And she tells him, come and sleep with me. She demands that of him. But Joseph refuses. And he says, look, my master trusts me with everything in his entire household. No one here has more authority than I do. He has held back nothing from me except for you, because you are his wife. How could I do such a wicked thing? It would be a great sin against God. So Joseph knows that it's wrong, and he realizes that this is wrong. He knows this is wrong, and he even expresses this to Potiphar's wife and tells her that, hey, No, I'm not going to do what you ask because it would be a great sin against God. Right here, Joseph is showing his integrity. He's saying that, yes, I could easily do that, but I'm refusing to do that. I'm refusing to sink to that level. I'm refusing to do what I know is wrong. And so he doesn't. Right there, he leaves that situation, but it doesn't stop. And one thing that the Lord showed me during this was that, the enemy's the same way. You might say no today, but guess what? The enemy's going to come at you again tomorrow, and he's going to come at you again the next day, and he's going to come at you again the next day. The pressure doesn't stop, and you have to be ready and willing to maintain your integrity and to say no in those times. So it keeps going in verse 10. She keeps putting pressure on Joseph day in and day out to the point where, he's coming into the house and he's trying to avoid Potiphar's wife altogether. I could see him peeking around corners. I can see him sneaking up the stairs, looking up the stairs to see if she's around. He's wanting to stay away from her as much as possible. And it reminds me of like back in elementary school, you always had the bully that was picking on little kids, and you would see the little kids trying to avoid the bully at all costs so that they didn't even have to go through the experience of or be subjected to that bullying at that time. It's the same thing here we see with Joseph. He's getting pressured by her so much that he is trying to avoid her at all costs. But then one day he goes in to do his work, but there's no one else around. And of course, here she comes. Come on, sleep with me. Joseph tore himself away, but he left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. Now, I can see this going down it's like Joseph already knew what 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18 said. Bear with me for a moment while I read that, because it's very, very important, because it speaks so much to what Joseph is experiencing. And so that's 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18. It says, run from sexual sin. Now that is with an explanation point. So it's run from sexual sin. The Lord is telling us to run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. It's like Joseph knew that. Joseph knew that this would definitely impact his relationship with the Lord in a negative way, and he didn't want any part of that. So he's running away, and he leaves his cloak behind. Now, what we see is that Joseph continues to reject Potiphar's wife over and over and over. Now, I'm sure that she is getting very frustrated with this. She's getting very angry with this because he keeps denying her what she's wanting. And so now she's got his cloak in her hands, and she sees an opportunity to plot against Joseph to get him back for rejecting her so many times. So what does she do? She screams. The servants come in. They all come running. And then it says, look, she said, my husband has brought this Hebrew slave here to make fools of us. He came into my room to rape me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream, he ran outside and got away, but he left his cloak behind with me. So then she keeps the cloak so she can explain the same story to Potiphar. Potiphar hears the story, and he is outraged. So what does Potiphar do? Doesn't even give Joseph the benefit of the doubt, doesn't have a conversation with him, just throws Joseph in prison. Now, I don't know about you, but if I held strong to my integrity, and now all of a sudden I'm getting thrown into prison for something that I'm not doing, being falsely accused, I would be down, I'd be low, I'd be out, I'd be discouraged. But again, it seems like Joseph is living day by day. He's living in the moment. He's living for the Lord for the right now. The Bible doesn't tell us otherwise. Now, I can imagine that, yes, he probably was down, he probably was out, but it didn't change his relationship with the Lord. So Joseph's thrown into prison, and verse 21, or actually a little bit before that, verse 20, so it says that he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. Now, that's amazing that when Joseph gets sold into slavery, the Lord was with him and was recognized by Potiphar. Now, Potiphar threw Joseph in prison, and yet the Lord is with him and is showing him his faithful love. And that's incredible right there. And then it says that the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Now, if you are serving the Lord and you are withholding your integrity and you are being faithful to God, God is going to be faithful to you. And that's what we see right here with Joseph. Joseph is remaining faithful to the Lord, and the Lord is remaining faithful to him and pouring out his faithful love. And so now Joseph becomes a favorite to the prison warden. And then before long, Joseph is put in charge of all the prisoners and over everything that happens in the prison. So he's given the most authority in the prison now as a prisoner. And it says that the warden has no worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Now, this is the exact same thing that it said about Potiphar early on when Joseph was put into in control of everything in Potiphar's household. It tells us that Potiphar worried about nothing because Joseph was in charge, and he knew that everything was going to be taken care of because the Lord was with Joseph, and everything he touched, he succeeded in. So that's kind of where we're at in chapter 39, and I want to go over a few key points there that I found very interesting. And the first key point is that God's presence in our lives is greater than our position. You might not like the situation that you find yourself in. You might not like the position that you find yourself in. But do you think Joseph wanted to be thrown into slavery, to be sold into slavery? Do you think Joseph wanted to be a slave in Potiphar's house? Do you think he wanted to be propositioned by Potiphar's wife and then thrown falsely into prison? No, he didn't want any of those things. Absolutely not. He did not. And, and I relate that to our lives. There's so many positions and situations that we might find ourselves in that we don't want to be in. But the important thing is that, Joseph, he doesn't let his situation cause him to compromise his integrity. He maintains his integrity. He knows what is right, and he does and continues to do what is right. By doing so, by maintaining your integrity, it might cost you something temporarily, but you will gain an eternal reward by doing so. Lastly, a question for everyone watching today. How do we maintain our integrity when no one is watching? Ponder that for a moment. How do we maintain our integrity when no one is watching? Well, first and foremost, there's never not anyone watching. You're watching. You see what you do. But not only that, God is always watching. So God knows as well. And in today's world, you never know where a hidden camera might be. So even when you think no one is watching, it could just be you. It could just be you and the Lord. Or it could be millions watching from a camera in the corner. So I encourage all of you that even when you think no one's watching, you're never alone. Please withhold your integrity and maintain your integrity so that you can receive the eternal reward that God has for you. Be like Joseph, because integrity brings God's faithful love. Thank you for joining us, and join us tomorrow for Genesis chapter 40 as we continue the 1189 adventure. Thank you. God bless you.